Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Sportscaster. I'm your host, Cooper Schoenberg, alongside my co-host, Carter Lutz. Great to be here. We are taking over for the Johnny Kane. He couldn't make it in today. He's got a little hair appointment, but no fear, we are here. And we're excited to get into it today with a couple of guests, Gabe Loper and Giovanni.
Gabe, we're happy to have you on as well. How you doing?
I'm doing quite well, guys. I'm happy to be here. Happy to, like I said, get together and produce some stuff. It's been a minute. We've known each other for so long. Now we get to get in and work a little bit. And oh yeah,
That's exactly right. Collaboration of the century.
Well, it's good to see you. We're going to hear some of your personal thoughts this week. We're taking a little different approach this week, though, Cooper.
Yep.
Cooper, what are we up to?
It's going to get mysterious. It's going to get a little spooky. We are going to be dipping and diving into the conspiracy theories of sports. Now, starting off with Gabe, if you're familiar with it, if you're not, revolves around the 2002 Western Conference NBA Finals taking place between the Los Angeles Lakers and the Sacramento Kings. You know, little referee issues, teams, players favorable, David Stern. We'll see what happens. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Don't want to spoil too much. But we're going to play that for you right now, and you'll get our live reactions to it.
Well, Gabe, when you were thinking about what conspiracy you wanted to bring to the table, what kind of went into your decision, and what are really your overall thoughts on sports conspiracies?
well, it's interesting, with this one in particular, because I'll mention in the piece, and it's like it's one of those things where the idea of games being rigged is such like a prevalent issue, regardless of whether they are or not, and it always seems like the fans of a losing team will be like, oh, this game was rigged for whatever, it was rigged for views, or regardless, regardless of it being true or not, that's always kind of some dialogue that's passed around, even with the NBA draft lottery that occurred just a few days ago. And everybody, it's with the Mavericks having a 1.8% chance of having the first overall pick, and despite trading superstar Luka Doncic, and then them getting the first overall pick with a lottery like that. There's always gonna be these things of this was rigged, this was rigged, and so it's really interesting taking that kind of discourse and then applying it to a game in a series where it's almost it brings up the case of, was this actually rigged, and the idea of there being evidence behind it, not just some pieced together things by fans. So overall, I think it's just a really interesting topic. It's a really interesting event. The fact that there was investigations and stuff after it with Tim Donaghy, and even players coming out, Shaq and Kobe both admitting at some point where it's like the game 100% was rigged, not like by fault of their own, but yeah.
And, you mentioned fans talking about it. Of course, we've talked about it as lifelong Lions fans. We've definitely thrown that around. But, conspiracies as a whole, you're taking one that, really connects the dots, really seems like it did happen. I'm curious as to what you think about taking a story that happened long before you were even a thought, long before we were all alive. That must have been interesting doing research on that and kind of seeing how that played into your story.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And like I said, everybody loves, the idea of like a conspiracy theory, especially in sports. Now, it was 2002, I was born in 2004, so it wasn't, it wasn't crazy long before,
Yep.
but not nonetheless, I think, the idea of, conspiracies in sports are really interesting, because you have to remember that sports are entertainment. They are they're not, it's not something that's like always live. And I remember as being as kids and figured out that WWE was mostly scripted, and that's one of those things where it's like you kind of apply that thought process elsewhere. And I'm sorry if there's any kids out there that don't
Come
think
on.
that
This is a kid's
WWE is
show.
some. I know,
Let's be
man.
better.
I know. Hey, listen, it's like Santa Claus, man. They got to know at some point. But yeah, like I said, maybe I just ruined some other kids' that dreams there too. But anyway, but yeah, like I said, it's an entertainment industry. It is for profit. These leagues, the NFL, the NBA, MLB, all of them are for profit leagues. So it's like I said, it's really interesting. It just makes you think critically, and I think that's the goal of this piece, and all the other ones that are going to be on here.
Now, you're a fan of all things San Francisco sports related. However, one thing we all have in common, from the Detroit area. And Carter and I, obviously big Pistons fans, going to be a little biased on this topic. Obviously, everything occurring recently with the Pistons Knicks first round of the Eastern Conference playoff series. Questionable calls, everything that happened between Josh Hart and Tim Hardaway. You obviously start to think, and yes, we are fans of the losing team, so we're playing into the narrative a little bit. However, you think with a team like New York, or even, in 2002 with the Los Angeles Lakers, these big market teams, that's who the league wants to advance. That's where the views are going to go. So it really is tough to argue and say, no, it was totally fair, just happened by chance. It's definitely interesting to look at. And you know what? We're going to hear from it right now. So let's hear what Gabe has to say regarding the Lakers Sacramento Kings series of 2002.
When a team loses in a 7-game series, it's very, very, very common for fans to yell out, "Oh, it's rigged. Oh, it wasn't our favor. The refs had us." But the 2002 Western Conference Finals is one of those instances where the losing fans, in this case the Sacramento Kings, may have added an interesting case. The 2002 Western Conference Finals was a thrilling series, with the Kings leading 3-2 heading into Game 6. But what happened in that game led many to believe, including former players, that something wasn't quite right. Let's start with the officiating. Many fans and analysts argue that referees made several questionable calls that favored the Lakers, especially in the fourth quarters. The Lakers shot an astonishing 27 free throws in the final quarter alone, compared to the Kings' 9. This discrepancy raised and continues to raise a lot of eyebrows. Former NBA referee Tim Donaghy, who was later convicted for betting on games he officiated, claimed that the NBA manipulated game outcomes to extend series to boost ratings. He was specifically mentioned the 2002 Western Conference Finals as an example of the league's influence. When Kobe Bryant was asked whether or not the game was rigged, he pointed to Donaghy. He said he had money on the game. That's a fact. Then there's the narrative around David Stern, the NBA commissioner at the time. Some people believe Stern preferred the Lakers to versus Nets finals for higher TV ratings and revenue. The theory suggests that the league had vested an interest in ensuring the Lakers advanced. Stern loved the idea of Lakers as a whole, with their star power and market relevance. Stern was quoted as saying his ideal NBA Finals was the Lakers versus the Lakers. In total, during the Game 6 matchup, the Lakers shot 43 free throws in Game 6, while the Kings shot only 25. The Kings were called for 31 fouls, and key players like Vlade Divac and Scott Pollard fouled out, significantly impacting their ability to compete in the paint against guys like Shaquille O'Neal. One of those fouls included the pinky foul, where Pollard just barely grazed the arm of O'Neal with his pinky, resulting in an immediate whistle and free throws for the Diesel. Another one of the more infamous calls was when Kobe Bryant elbowed Mike Bibby in the face, but no foul was called. This non-call denied the Kings a crucial opportunity to tie or even win the game down the stretch. So was Game 6 of the 2002 Western Conference Finals rigged? The evidence certainly raises questions whether it was intentional manipulation or just a series of unfortunate calls. The controversy remains a hot topic amongst NBA fans today and will for years to come. The NBA and several leagues have been obviously accused of rigging games in certain scenarios, but once again, this one may have some traction. Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal will both acknowledge the free throw discrepancy throughout the game, but was intentional? Bad calls. The Kings would go on to win Game 7, missing 20 of their own free throws, leading to a Lakers NBA Finals appearance and win against the Brooklyn Nets. You be the judge, rigged or not. I'm Gabe Loper from Sportscaster.com.
Well, that was phenomenal, Gabe. Absolutely loved it. And let me tell you what I think. What I think is that the facts and the evidence are there. You talk about 27-9 free throws. You talk about, pivotal players. Vlad Divac, well, he was going against Shaquille O'Neal. He fouls out. That allows the Lakers to really get into their groove. Look, Sacramento, still a big-ish market team, but nothing's competing with the Lakers. Just as I previously said, nothing's competing with the Knicks. It's really tough to argue. And with such a flawed referee, such as Tim Donaghy was, the pieces start to align. You talk about the fans obviously being, angry and salty and wanting to point fingers. Well, it's pretty easy to point fingers, especially, Gabe, you talked about the Mike Bibby getting the elbow to the face from the late, great Kobe Bryant. That's right in front of us. That was a pivotal play that could have allowed the Sacramento Kings to get the ball back and have a chance to tie it up. However, they weren't able to do that because the call wasn't called, just like many other calls weren't called. So it's interesting to see. Carter, what do you think about it?
It's good points all around. I think it's a conspiracy that's pretty consistent when we talk about, the main sports conspiracies, and so much evidence, probably the most evidence out of all of them. And you talked about Tim Donaghy, the NBA referee. It's a great book. He talks about what it was like being a referee during that time. And a point that I want to bring up and interested to hear from Gabe's point of view is that what do you think it would be like now, or could it even happen now with the way social media is, with the microscope that all NBA games are played on nowadays? We're watching everything, seeing how it all plays out. Lots of talking heads on the side. I don't think it could happen now, but what do you think with all the facts that you gave out there?
Ah, man. Well, like I said, I mean, the NBA is a big league, with a lot of money and a lot of influence. And I think, when you mention social media and stuff, well, I think there's a lot of attention that these things can get. But overall, I mean, what influence does social media have on the outcome of a game? And thinking about, I mean, fans can call out whatever, and we see this even now with either Super Bowls and missed calls in different leagues all around. It's always going to generate craze on social media. Refs will be called out, but at the end of the day, if the NBA wants to do something like the evidence shows that they did in 2006 or 2002 during Game 6 of the Western Conference Final, I think they absolutely can. I think they absolutely can, and the reason that they would get away with it is because of the lack of influence of social media and talking heads and everything else on the actual outcome of the games. I mean, like, there'll be discourse and talks and everything else about it, but you know at the end of the day, the final score is the final score. And do I see the NBA going back and correcting a game by playing it again and with either same or different referees? I don't see it happening. So, like I said, when you're dealing with money and you're up against things like influence of like a big market team looking to move on, it's tough to go against.
Well, definitely a lot to unpack there, and I completely agree. Just kind of changing the whole landscape. Obviously, it's 2002, not as much technology as there is today. And Carter mentioned it, every player, every play, every game under what seems to be a microscope. But Gabe, thank you so much for joining us. Up next, we're going to be talking Fisherman with Giovanni regarding a little Michael Phelps Olympic conspiracy theory. We'll be right back.